We're now past the seasonal peak for home sales and home prices. Each year, market activity peaks at the end of June and begins a slow decline through the second half of the year. As we get later in the year, there tends to be fewer sales that complete, and they happen at slightly lower prices. This seasonal peak happens for sales, for prices, and for new listings each week. Each of these stats will crest over and have fewer through the end of the year. Inventory, however, keeps building for a few more months. So, what do we know about the 2025 housing market, and what can we see in the data now about what's in store for the rest of the year? A couple of big trends stand out. First is that the home sales numbers are turning positive. So far this year, the number of home sales has been very slow, even slower than 2024. But starting with the June sales numbers and looking into July and August, we should see growth, finally. Last fall, I had forecasted about 5% growth in home sales for 2025, and we've been behind that estimate all year long. It now looks like we're finally turning the corner. The other trend, though, is that even as home sales are ticking up, unsold inventory continues to build, and home price appreciation is just barely positive over 2024. So we're currently measuring about 1% home price gains nationally over 2024. And the leading indicators show price pressures continue. So home prices could turn negative later this year. I'm Mike Simonsen. I'm the Chief Economist for Compass. In these weekly videos, I look at the U.S. housing data every week. Our goal is to help everyone understand what's actually happening in the market right now so they can make the best decisions about buying and selling a home. In them, I use data from Altos Research. In the coming weeks, I'll be able to add insights from what we see at Compass, the largest real estate brokerage in the country by sales volume. This combination is a very powerful view of the U.S. real estate market. Okay, let's get into the data for the week of July 21, 2025. So I mentioned that the sales numbers are likely turning positive. Here's how we know. Since the end of May, the weekly pending sales counts, the contracts, have come in a little bit above a year ago each week. We've been averaging about 67,000 single-family home contracts per week, up from just 63,000 a year ago. We've had 2 months or so of the weekly data averaging about 5% growth. Homes that go into contract at the end of May will close the transaction in June or July. So this Wednesday, when NAR reports the June home sales numbers, I wouldn't be surprised if they're above June of last year. This will be a reversal of recent headlines. Up till now, the headlines have reported fewer home sales than 2024. Last year's very low sales numbers were even lower in the first half of 25. But that narrative should get a slight positive inversion starting soon. So in the real-time data, we now consistently see more contracts started than last year. June, July, and August were particularly bad in 2024. So the comparison is easier now. Our weekly pending data is corroborated by the Mortgage Bankers' weekly survey of purchase mortgage applications. So mortgage applications are up big, and the actual offers and contracts are up a little bit. So I expect the sales numbers to actually tick up soon, too. There's not a lot of home sales happening, of course. I'm just looking for a change in those headlines, a tiny bit of optimism. So let's look at the pending sales data here. This week, the newly pending home sales rebounded after the holiday weekend to 67,000 single-family unit sales. There were another 13,000 condo contracts started for a total of 80,000 newly pending home sales. That's the total for the week is 7.3% more than the same week a year ago. 7% increase should be bigger than noise. This is one of the indicators that says to me that the July sales numbers, when they're available in August, will also show gains over 2024. We've been averaging about 5% increases in the weekly pending data for about 8 weeks in a row now. In this chart, we're showing the 2025 line in blue and 24 in purple. You can see the blue line is generally above the purple line for the last few weeks. You can see the dip in the July 4th holiday weekend in both years' data. As I mentioned, the annual comparisons should be pretty easy in July and August. These were really slow periods a year ago, so absent some big shock to the markets or interest rates, I expect us to see the weekly pending home sales data to keep reporting growth. I expect the headlines you hear in the news to start reporting positive home sales numbers. That'll be a reversal of recent headlines, so be on the lookout for that change. Year to date, we've still racked up fewer total contracts than in 2024 by just 0.5%, though. So that comes to about just 10,000 fewer home sales year to date. Each week we have about 5,000 more sales starting than last July. So by mid-August, maybe the 25 full year will show slight home sales growth over 24. That's a little silver lining in a pretty cloudy year in the real estate market. So that's the sales trends. Let's look at the active inventory. There are now 857,000 single-family homes on the market. Add another 230,000 condos for a total of just under 1.1 million homes unsold, active on the market across the country. That's 28% more than a year ago. In this chart, we're showing the active inventory of single-family homes. So each line is a year. The blue line is this year, and you can see that we're now in this range at the top of the chart, which has how much unsold inventory we used to have in the years before the pandemic. Since 22, we've had 3 years of rising mortgage rates, high mortgage rates, and that created 3 years of rising inventory. As of mid-July, there is no sign that either of these conditions change. So rates are staying close to 7% for now, and as a result, the unsold inventory of homes on the market continues to build. So we expect inventory to peak in October this year. And you can compare this year's blue line to last year's purple line. See how the purple line doesn't hit the apex until late October? That's probably what we're looking at for 2025 as well. At that time, there will be over 900,000 single-family homes unsold. Here's a footnote that is hard for some people to grasp. If rates fall, say close to 6%, that'll spur demand faster than supply. So inventory would peak earlier in the year and even start receding. There's a bunch of pent-up demand on the sidelines. But until that lucky break happens, inventory is rising with the higher cost of money. So inventory is the number of available homes. The new listings is a stat where we count the velocity of sellers coming into market. So that velocity is a little faster than 2024, but it still isn't fast. This is one of the signals that tells us if rate falls, demand will grow faster than supply. There's just not a lot of sellers interested in testing a slow market. So this week, new listings rebounded to 73,000 single-family homes plus another 15,000 condos, 88,000 total new listings this week, unsold. That's probably 15% fewer sellers each week than the old normal times, which you can see at the top of the chart in gray. In this chart, each line is year. So the gray lines are previous years going back to the pre-pandemic era. The blue line is this year. You can see we have slightly more sellers each week than the purple line from last year. The blue line is just above the purple line here, right? But also note that we have fewer sellers than before the pandemic. So those older gray lines at the top show us just how many more sellers we'd normally see each week in the summer. So we know the unsold inventory on the market is growing. And we also know the velocity of new sellers isn't super strong. That means that inventory has sort of a bit of a lid. It implies the worst of the housing market doom scenarios are very unlikely. There just aren't enough sellers for supply to get too far out of whack. And that takes us to home prices. Home prices are still just a fraction above last year nationally. For 3 years now, the story has been home sales are falling, but home prices are up. That story is in the process of inverting. Home sales are up now, but home prices are at the risk of declining. So this is the price chart for the weekly pending home sales price. I love this measure of prices because these are the homes that people are buying right now. These are the newly pending contracts in any given week. So these contracts are home sales that will mostly close in August. And we can see that the prices being paid are just barely above last year. So normally, each year prices generally run above the year prior. We normally get home price gains. You can see that trend in the most recent 4 years that I have plotted here. The blue line for 2025 is just barely above 24 now, though. So we're in the second half of the year, so home prices in nominal terms decline for the rest of the year. You can see that we're past the seasonal peak. The question from here is how quickly prices ease down in the fall. Because the home price numbers in the headlines are now commonly talking about falling home prices, I've highlighted two moments on this chart from 2022. So the yellow line is 2022. In that year, there were abrupt spikes in mortgage rates that led to abrupt drops in home prices in June and again in October. And so those are highlighted in gray here. Those abrupt home price changes are not underway right now, but they would happen if, say, mortgage rates jump over 7%. So that's something to keep a watch out for. The median price for single-family homes in the U.S. this week is $395,000. That's a dip from the year's seasonal peak of $400,000. Prices of the weekly pending single-family home sales have been averaging only about 1% above last year at this time in July. All of the lagging indicators on prices, like from NAR or the Case-Shiller Index or Freddie Mac, they've all been trending in that same direction. So watch for those announcements in the future to keep trending lower as well. So all in all, we're at a moment where the headline story of the last few years probably starts to inverse. Home sales will be ticking up, but prices could finish the year negative compared to 2024. So let's wrap today with a look into the future. There are now 41.4% of the homes on the market that have taken a price reduction from the original list price. That's up 70 basis points for the week. There are significantly more homes on the market now sitting without offers, and that means they have to reduce their asking price. So this chart shows us how sensitive the market is to changes in interest rates. I've highlighted the orange line, which is 2022. 3 years ago, we were talking about rates were rising rapidly, and home buying demand was hitting the brakes. And we could easily measure that change in demand with the price reductions curve in real time. That's the orange line spiking. In late 22, price cuts hit 43% of all listings. That led to home price declines in Q1 and Q2 of the following year. And you can see it in this data 6 months prior. That's how valuable this data is. So compared to last year, September 24, mortgage rates had the temporary dip down close to 6%. That improvement spurred demand for several months. The purple line showed how demand and prices stabilized in late 24. So now finally in 2025, the blue line, mortgage rates have stayed higher for longer, and we haven't gotten any reprieve on rates, and demand is waiting on the sidelines. So the data indicates overpriced sellers are not getting the offers. Buyers are perfectly happy to wait. So these are homes that will get offers and sell sometime in the future. So this suggests that future sales prices will continue to have downward pressure in the coming months. As I've mentioned above, if we get a spike in mortgage rates, buyers are very sensitive, and I'd expect you to see an immediate impact on sales prices. This sensitivity is baked in already. The market's very fragile. So that's all the time we have for today. I'll be doing these videos every week. Make sure you subscribe to the Compass YouTube channel so you don't miss any of the great data. I also invite you to learn more about Compass at compass.com. Thanks, everybody.